Welcome to the greatest podcast you've ever had the pleasure of listening to. I'm Sean McCabe here with the one and only James Kokolek. James, how are you today?
I'm all right. How are you?
I've never been better a day in my life. Thank you for asking. Please, guys, like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, listen to us on iTunes, and feel free to email us with any of your complaints or compliments at bthashmarks@gmail.com. We have an absolutely loaded show today. Is this really Drew Brees' last season in New Orleans? Who's going to win the college basketball championship? We also have a great heartwarming story, basically telling you why we love sports. But now, it's time for my opening rant.
Your number one source for sports.
You know who I can't stand? Kevin Durant.
He looks like Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton had a kid.
Now, who can argue with that?
I hate Boston.
I'm the biggest Miami Heat hater you'll ever meet.
I just don't understand where you're getting your bogus information from.
What the hell are you even talking about?
Well, I'm sorry you're too freaking sensitive to handle the truth.
You think I'm crazy? I'm just getting warmed up.
You're now between the hash marks with James Kokolak and Sean McCabe.
Your general sports media loves to bash the Dallas Cowboys. It gets them big-time ratings because Dallas is the type of team, like the Yankees, where you either love them or you can't stand them. And that is why you have been hearing over the past few days on why the Cowboys are absolutely done with 5 games left to go on Zeke Elliott's suspension. People love hearing about how the Cowboys are going to be absolutely terrible, whether it is factual or not. So are the Cowboys really in trouble without Ezekiel Elliott? First off, let's break down this question. Are they going to miss Elliott? Absolutely. He's one of the best running backs in the game with his vision, running ability, pass catching ability, not to mention blocking ability. But is he really worth that much that he is irreplaceable for this team? Absolutely not. And here is the part where you all overreact and say that I'm nuts, especially after that loss that they just had to Atlanta, 27-7. But newsflash, the Cowboys didn't lose because of not having Ezekiel Elliott. They lost because they didn't have Tyron Smith, which nobody seems to be talking about, who is the best left tackle in the entire game, which is why the Falcons were able to sack Dak Prescott 6 times from one player. Absolutely insane. They still ran over 5 yards a carry that entire game. 107 yards on 21 carries. Yes, I know some of it was Dak, but you can't take that away from their running ability because they actually do run the ball with Dak every single game. Not to mention, Atlanta is averaging the same amount of net yards per play. That's offensive yards per play and defensive yards per play, the net of that. They have the same amount as last year's Super Bowl appearing team. Number 1 again this year. They have the same exact amount. But Elliott is not worth as much as people think. And one, because running backs just really don't matter that much. They don't change the outcomes of games like that. But 2, it's because Dak Prescott is the real deal. He's super impressive. Being a QB is tough. But being a QB for the Dallas Cowboys may be the toughest thing to be in all of sports. And that is in a normal year. But this year is filled with distractions, from Ezekiel Elliott's suspension to Jerry Jones filing a complaint against the NFL and Roger Goodell himself, to Jerry Jones just always loving making the Cowboys be in the headlines overall. And through all of that, Dak Prescott has excelled better than anyone could have ever imagined. It's the reason why I like players like Dak Prescott over Cam Newton. Dak is the leader of this team, and when he has the best left tackle back, they will not be missing Ezekiel Elliott. However, this doesn't mean that they are guaranteed to make the playoffs. They're currently 10th in the NFC right now, 5-4 with the tiebreakers and everything. There's teams that are also 5-4 that are ahead of them, like the Falcons who just beat them, and the Packers who we think are done, but they are ahead of them because they did beat them. And they basically have no shot at this division. They're 3 games back in the division, basically no shot. And I had them at the beginning of the year as a borderline playoff team. And that's what they are right now. They are a borderline playoff team. They might make it, they might not. But if they don't make it, it's not because of not having Ezekiel Elliott for the next 5 games. Yes, he is amazing and maybe the best back in this league, but this league will always be about who your quarterback is and who is protecting that quarterback. With Smith back next week and serviceable running backs like Alfred Morris and McFadden, and Dak's ability to just control the entire game at will, the Cowboys will excel. James, what do you think?
Well, I agree and I disagree with you on a bunch of different points here. What I agree with is that the Cowboys they're not in trouble losing Zeke. I have to agree there. I disagree with the fact that they're a borderline playoff team right now and that they're completely out of the division. They're only 3 games back with 2 games still to play against the Philadelphia Eagles. If the Eagles lose 1 or 2 more games and the Cowboys end up winning out somehow or even just losing another couple of games, this is still doable. Missing Tyrone Smith is huge. He's kind of like the Nick Mangold was for the Jets for so long. He wasn't a left tackle, but he was that centerpiece to the offensive line. He made everything go. Tyrone Smith makes everything go on that offensive line. He's not making the calls, but he's the one who's blocking that blind side for Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott's numbers on the year right now, 63.3 completion percentage, 16 touchdowns and 4 interceptions with a 96.3 rating. That's only going to go up with Zeke missing because they're going to throw the ball now more than they have. Offensively, they're 8th in points per game, 25, 11th in yards, 355, 211 pass yards per game, that's 20th in the league, which I expect to go up over the next 5 games, and they're 2nd in rushing with 143. That's going to go down. But McFadden can get the job done. He ran for 1,000 yards behind this offensive line just 2 years ago when DeMarco Murray left to go to the Eagles. This team is better than what people think. Right now, their turnover differential on the year is a +2. This late into the season to have a +2 turnover differential, that's pretty good considering a team that we don't think they're great defensively. But the most mind-boggling stat of all here is their time of possession. It is basically split 50-50 with the amount they run the ball. So far on the season, average, the Cowboys hold the ball for 30 minutes and 27 seconds, and their opponents have it for 29 minutes and 33 seconds. The key for them to be successful over the next 5 weeks is for them to hold the ball. Don't rush up to the line. Keep that time of possession in your favor. I couldn't have said it any better than you have earlier. Dak Prescott is the real deal. He's going to be a top 5 quarterback in this league for a long time. He's a top 10 quarterback, in my opinion, right now because of the way he holds himself, the way he composes himself, being the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, which is the hardest position to play in all of NFL. So it goes both ways, but in reality, they should not miss Zeke all that much considering the pieces they have around complete as a team as a whole.
So I just want to be clear here. You disagree that they're a borderline playoff team. You're saying that they are definitely a playoff team?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe that at the end of the season, they will be a playoff team. They're too loaded with talent, and the division is still not out of the question either.
Well, the thing that I'm saying here, yes, the division is definitely not I shouldn't have said that it was out of reach. It's not out of reach yet. I mean, this Sunday night is going to be that game where if they lose, then it's probably
out of reach. Absolutely.
But they're 3 games back of the division right now. Let's just say they split with Philly, and then they still have a game against the Giants. And
that's a win.
Maybe. Well, you never know with new players and coming in and you just don't know. But
as of right now, I'm going to take a guess and say it's a win. They just lost to the 49ers.
Well, just the division matchups usually mean a little more.
Absolutely. Like Patriots.
The Jets always play well against the Patriots, no matter how bad the Jets are.
Mm-hmm.
So it's true. So these division rivals, the games are played a lot differently than how you expect. But I'm just looking at the standings here, and just the teams that have more wins than them, Seattle, Carolina, Los Angeles, New Orleans, Minnesota, and Philadelphia, I don't see any of those teams falling off. Like maybe Los Angeles, but no, they have a pretty easy schedule. Maybe Seattle.
I would take a stab at it and say Seattle. Seattle just lost the most key and vital piece to their defense, I believe, in Richard Sherman. He shuts down half the field every single game, and now they don't have that anymore. Now they're going to have to use Earl Thomas over the top. Now they're going to have to use Cam Chancellor over the top. They don't have that luxury of being able to send one of those guys on a blitz or let one of them kind of roam free in a sense like Earl Thomas does all the time. It takes away from that defense, and personally, I'm going to drop their defense in fantasy because of it, and I do believe that they're going to take a hit. They haven't looked like the Seahawks all year, and they don't really have any impressive wins per se. If a team's going to fall off, it'll be them.
Well, the other two teams that are just ahead of them, because let's count Green Bay out, even though they are 5-4 as well. But I mean, Detroit and Atlanta, they just lost to Atlanta. Obviously, we gave the excuse because of Tyron Smith, but they still lost by 20 points.
But losing Tyrone Smith and not having Zeke is a vital part of their team. Maybe missing one or the other, they can deal with it. Missing both, that throws a whole monkey wrench into everything. I think if Tyrone Smith is playing that game, they may not have won, but it's not a 27-7 game.
Yeah,
that's a 27-24 game.
My thing with them being a borderline playoff team is that they are very much on the borderline. They're one game back, but they are missing all the tiebreakers. Literally everybody that they're tied with has a tiebreaker over them.
Also, one other team on that list that I haven't been high on all year, and I will never be high on them because of their quarterback, the Carolina Panthers.
Okay, but what do you have to say when Carolina has a game like they had on Monday night, against the Dolphins? I know it's against the Dolphins, and the Dolphins are basically the 49ers with just 4 wins, exactly. But still, they're one of the most talented rosters all the way through, and Cam Newton has those games.
He has those games, but he has too many of the other side of the games.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I had Carolina winning this division not because of really of Cam Newton, but because of everything they have around him.
I should say this: it wouldn't surprise me if Carolina ended the season 10-6. It also wouldn't surprise me to see them end the season 8-8 with only one more win on the season. So they're kind of that borderline team as well with the Cowboys. Even though they're in that spot right now.
You do realize the Carolina Panthers play the Jets next in 2 weeks. No, I know, I'm just playing.
And you know what? And the Jets looked horrendous against the Bucs, but that only gives them motivation to come out and play better. Yeah. And when the Jets have played good this year, their defense has looked pretty solid. Their offense is a whole different ball game. But their defense has looked pretty good. And if their defense can shut down Cam Newton like I think we can, that's not a surefire win for the Panthers, I'll tell you that.
No, I'm not saying nothing's a surefire thing. But let's look at Dallas' remaining schedule. They play home against the Eagles, home against the Chargers. But Chargers, if you just look at all of their games, they play better on the road than at home.
And Phillip Rivers may not even play, though. Right now he's in concussion protocol.
Yeah, but in 2 weeks, we'll see. But then they play home against the Redskins. Redskins always give them a tough one on Thanksgiving. And then at the Giants, you think that's a win. Okay, I'll give you that one. And then at the Raiders. And then they get Zeke Elliott back for the Seahawks. And then they go to Philadelphia again. I mean, yes, they could get that Philly win if Philly has already locked up the conference. But, we don't know that at all.
I think every single one of those games on that schedule is a winnable game for the Cowboys.
Absolutely, they're winnable. They're absolutely winnable games.
And Dak Prescott reminds me of a young Tom Brady for some reason. Just the way he carries himself, he's so poised, the way he plays the game and he goes about it. You don't see that type of mentality from a young quarterback.
No, he's special.
Very often.
And
I think that he's gonna bring them to the playoffs this year, and he's gonna prove to people that he doesn't need Zeke. That people think that Zeke is what's carrying them and Dak is coming along for the ride. I think Dak's out to prove that it's the opposite.
Yeah, no, and I think people that think Zeke is the one carrying this team that just don't really understand the whole dynamics of the NFL and how this really works. This isn't college where you can just throw out some. I mean, Alabama does this all the time. They just have some freshman quarterback, and then they just have 4 running backs. One goes down, okay, next one up, and they are capable of running for 200 yards in any game.
Yep.
But that's not the NFL. You can't just do that.
No, it's a totally different game. And I actually heard this on a show earlier this morning that when you see 500-yard games in the NFL, that there's something wrong there. The defenses in the NFL should not be giving up that much. 350 at maximum should be that average point. And even if you're hitting in the 400s, that's a lot to be given up for an NFL team. It's a totally different ball game, college and NFL. And in the NFL, you need a quarterback. And in college, you don't need a quarterback. You need... I think running backs have proven to be more valuable than a quarterback in college football.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just look at Leonard Fournette and LSU. Like, you can't even name who his quarterback was unless you were following the SEC or you're an
Look
LSU
at Ohio
fan.
State with Zeke Elliott.
Oh yeah, precisely.
Alabama was heavily favored to win the national championship that year.
Who's Cardell Jones? Like,
who's JT Barrett?
Exactly.
So it goes a long way, but Dak Prescott is the real deal.
Yeah, okay.
Zeke is going to come back, and they'll be in good shape, I think, when he comes back.
So you agree with me on that, but you disagree with me that Dallas is borderline and the division they have no shot at the division.
Well, yes. Now that we've looked at it in depth, the borderline playoff makes sense because technically they are borderline, but the division is totally still in play here. I still think that the Dallas Cowboys can beat out the Eagles for the NFC title this year.
All right. Coming up next, is this really Drew Brees' last season as a New Orleans Saint? You're listening to BTH.
You're listening to Between the Hash Marks with James Koklak and Sean McCabe, brought to you by an unknown sponsor we don't have yet. Now back to the show.
And we're back here, and we got a bunch of stuff to talk about this segment. We're going to kind of sidetrack for a little bit at some point. We'll get to that. But is this really Drew Brees' last season with the Saints? It's hard to imagine, but it's very possible. It's a big talk in the NFL right now.
Yeah, it has been a conversation, but we'll see.
I think it was more realistic when the Saints were 2-2 and their defense kind of looked off par.
Or before the season began.
But now there's 7 straight wins. I mean, where did this come from? So... do I think that Drew Brees is going to leave the Saints? I think it is very possible. I put together some teams here. Now, there are 2 teams in particular that I think if he's going to end up next year, yes, one of them is the New Orleans Saints. He's been there for 10 years. He's won a Super Bowl there. He's familiar with the system, the coaches, the players. And he finally has that good defense that he's been waiting for in New Orleans. Every year, it feels like the Saints have this high-powered offense, top 5 offense, and they have the dead last defense. And he can put up 45 points a game, and they're still letting up 46 plus. He has that now in New Orleans, and it's going to be tough for him to leave. But there's one team in particular that I think if he's going to leave, it's going to be for the Denver Broncos.
Okay.
Hear me out.
Okay.
They have 2 star wide receivers, Emmanuel Sanders and Demaryius Thomas. They have John Elway in the front office. A phenomenal phenomenal quarterback mind. Even as Drew Brees' talent, you can always pick information from somebody who is great. They have a top 5 defense, and they probably have the most complete team in the whole NFL besides a quarterback. If you put Drew Brees on the Broncos today, this team might be undefeated as we speak. They're that good. And the only thing that would hold me up to think that it's a done deal as of right now is that they play out in the cold. Drew Brees has never played in the cold. He played in San Diego, and then he played in New Orleans. So that's the one iffy spot. I want to throw a couple other teams out there, see what you think. The Cardinals, they have a plethora of wide receivers. They got a star running back. They play 8 games minimum in a dome per year. We're not counting away games here. They may play Minnesota or in New Orleans. They may play more than 8 games in a dome. The Vikings, they have a great team all around too. All they seem to need right now is that star quarterback. They look to be just a quarterback away. And here's the kicker to the Vikings, is that they play in a brand new facility. A state-of-the-art, brand spanking new. And we all know that a newer facility goes lengths. That was one of the reasons Eric Decker signed with the Jets 3 or 4 off seasons ago, was because of the facility that we had for him to work out in, how nice it was, how state-of-the-art and brand new it was. And that was a huge selling point for the Jets to bring in a great wide receiver after he had just went to the Super Bowl. So those are my teams that I think he could end up on. the last one, it's hard to say, but the Dolphins. And the reason I say them is because they have two good wide receivers, they have a good defense, and it's not cold with two pass-catching running backs right now. But the one thing that drives me insane about them is they're so talented and they play with no passion. Now, here's that little story that I teased last week and Sean teased earlier in this podcast, was passion. Brian Boyle of the New Jersey Devils was diagnosed with cancer right before the NHL season started. He has had nothing but a smile on his face, at least to the public and to the media, since that day. Brian Boyle made his season debut 2 weeks ago. And the one thing that stuck out to me is that he wanted to play, even though he still, as we speak, has cancer. He was not cured. He is not in remission right now. And he's out there playing. And he scored a goal the other night, as I showed you on a video last week, and you can see the fire and the passion in his eyes, in his face, how emotional he was. And that's the passion that every sports player, every professional athlete needs to play with. And the New Jersey Devils are by far and away my favorite team of all time in any sport, any team, anything. The Devils are mine. And to see that somebody on my favorite team have that kind of passion gave me goosebumps and gave me chills. And I bring this up now is because Drew Brees is coming to the end of his career. And I think if he's going to leave the Saints, he's going to want to play for a team that has that same kind of passion from guys 1 through 53, the coaching staff, the owner, etc. What do you think about any of these teams? Does anything stand out to you? What do you think about the passion?
Okay, with the Broncos, I just want to destroy your point that they'd be undefeated. Their special teams is absolutely terrible, and they've lost 2 games this year just because the special teams has been terrible. Last week against New England, where special teams just screwed them up and down the field all game long, and that game against San Diego, where the defense really didn't give up. I think the defense gave up like 1 touchdown, but the whole team gave up 24 points. So just had to destroy you on that one, right? For a minute.
But also, if say Drew Brees is on that team right now, they may not even been in close games like that, though. They may not have been in a position to let the special teams let them down that big.
Well, not to mention their defense has gotten some injuries. It's definitely not as good as the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season. But the Broncos, yes, they do need a QB, but they also need an offensive line. And Drew Brees is not going to go anywhere. He's not going to leave New Orleans.
On the ground.
Yeah, exactly. He's not going to go anywhere that doesn't have an offensive line. So that's why I absolutely do not think the Denver Broncos. The Minnesota Vikings, it also makes no sense to me because they fully believe in Case Keenum this year / Teddy Bridgewater, and they fully believe in Teddy Bridgewater this or next season. The only way I could see them getting Drew Brees is if Case Keenum goes down, Teddy Bridgewater comes in, is absolutely god-awful terrible, and they realize, wow, we need a damn quarterback. But even then, I still think that they would believe in the process with Keenum and Bridgewater.
The reason I brought them up was strictly because even though Bridgewater's cleared right now, that may not hold up. His knee may not hold up. He's got to go through a whole training camp, etc.
Well, Keenum's looked good, though.
Yeah, but if
Keenum has a top 5 quarterback rating, I believe, this season.
If you got a choice between Case Keenum and Drew Brees for one season,
well, obviously
I'm going with Drew Brees. That's the only reason I put them on the list. They're not the ideal landing spot, but there's not that many teams right now that I can see Drew Brees having a good fit on.
Okay, and with the Dolphins, yeah, this makes no sense unless the Saints actually trade him this season, which they won't because they're in position to possibly win a Super Bowl, make the playoffs and possibly win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, he's not getting traded.
Yeah, he's not getting traded.
Well, trade deadline passed.
Yeah, exactly. So unless something like that was going to happen, the Dolphins are not going to take him because they like Ryan Tannehill a lot. Like, they like him so much that they weren't sure if they wanted to bring somebody like Jay Cutler in because Jay Cutler would have that possibility before we've seen have that possibility of taking the job overall. But in Miami, they look bad.
They look terrible.
They look bad, and so like, why would Drew Brees want to go someplace where the team looks bad? I couldn't see him walking for there. The only one that sort of makes sense, and I say sort of, is the Arizona Cardinals. And this is just because a lot of old football players just love retiring in Arizona. The weather's nice. Bruce Arians is a good offensive-minded head coach. They do have a star running back. Their receivers, though, I like Larry Fitzgerald is up in the air every single year for the past 2 or 3 years. Is he going to play this season? Is he not going to play this season? So I think if Larry Fitzgerald does retire after this season, there's no way Drew Brees goes. But let's just
I have the Cardinals in there thinking Larry Fitzgerald, John Brown, Jerron Brown.
Yeah. Okay. So let's assume that Larry Fitzgerald does stay. I still don't see it, but the only thing I give some credit to that a lot of old players love going there. I mean, just look at Adrian Peterson and Emmitt Smith and Edgerrin James and Carson Palmer, and the list goes on and on of just old dudes that want to go play in Arizona. But in all honesty, because the Saints are doing so well right now, there is no shot in my mind that they are letting Drew Brees walk. If they were not close, then they would. I think they would just let him walk because it's time to start. It's time to start moving on. But you know what? Drew Brees and Sean Payton, they have a great relationship.
Are they gonna have the cap to pay him though?
Well, the thing is, what is most likely is going to happen is they're just going to give him a lot of money for 1 year. And that's
it could be incentive based, ridiculous incentive.
Yeah.
Pass for 100 yards in one game and you get a $5 million check, something like that, so he can get his money and it's not that
strictly, something incentive based, something I think sort of like what Tom Brady has, where it's pretty much all incentive based. But I mean, you can't split up Drew Brees and Sean Payton. They have a great relationship. They've won a Super Bowl together. They've been through really good times and really bad times. And hell, they're even part of the same damn fraternity. They're both Sigma Chi, members of Sigma Chi. They're not just gonna break up like that.
Now, if I had to pick right now, is Drew Brees gonna land somewhere else? Question is, I told you, Broncos and Saints would be the only two teams I can think of. The Broncos can fix that offensive line next year in free agency through the draft. If they did that, they got healthy, that team would look scary with Drew Brees, with Emmanuel Sanders, and the weapons that they have.
That would be terrifying.
So I'm taking that into consideration. And the only reason that I put the Dolphins on this list was because I think that attitude and the motivation and that problem stems with Jay Cutler.
Yeah.
With Jay Cutler being there and bringing down that locker room.
Yeah, okay,
I think with a different quarterback in there and a different mindset. Now, this is all stemming on if Ryan Tannehill's knee is not ready to go next year.
Ryan Tannehill's going to be ready to go next year.
So, it just...
They didn't waste their time this year with it like they did last year after he did get hurt.
So, it just... But if you look at the list of teams right now, there are not a lot of teams that Drew Brees would fit on. First of all, not a lot of teams need quarterbacks. And some of the teams that need quarterbacks, like the Jets, he would not be a good fit for the Jets right now. The Jets are not in win now mode. They're in a play hard now mode and build for the future mode. That's not a team that he would fit on, even though they need a quarterback. So it's really hard it would be hard for him to find a home, I think. And I think that the only two realistic spots would be the Broncos and the Saints, and possibly the Arizona Cardinals.
I completely disagree. I see more of realistic possibility of him going to Jacksonville or something, even though I don't believe they have the cap space for it at all. But I think that's more realistic than him going to Miami or going to Denver or going to Minnesota. I don't even think there's a chance of him going to Minnesota at all.
Miami and Minnesota to me are long shots. The Cardinals is more of an up in the air. The most realistic thing here is the Broncos and Saints, and for the one reason, Saints, he's been there, he's won a Super Bowl. You just mentioned Sean Payton, they go way back. And the Broncos, if they can fix that offensive line, they do have John Elway. John Elway was able to bring Peyton Manning in after Peyton Manning played in a dome his whole career, so anything could happen. That connection with John Elway could lure Drew Brees, and that's one of the strong points that made me think the Broncos have a legitimate shot at bringing him in if he were to leave this, if the Saints don't bring him back.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to repeat myself saying how dumb you are, but I'm kidding. But I do want to touch on the Brian Boyle thing, just to give a couple of thoughts. I don't think people realize with him, this dude got diagnosed in mid-September. And you said it. He still has cancer. But by the way, it's a very treatable cancer.
Yes.
But still, it's incredibly rare to have. I think it was a chronic myeloid leukemia. Yeah. And it's treatable, but incredibly rare. And when you showed me this video, the pure joy and reaction on his face is absolutely incredible. And like it almost brings a tear to your eye just watching this guy, and you know his story, just watching this guy just jump for joy, and you just wish all your players were like that all the time.
If everybody was like that, it would make, one, sports more enjoyable, and two, I think that every team every game would be better.
And maybe Jay Cutler would be a lot better.
And
if he had that
wouldn't
kind of
have that
attitude.
stone face on he always has on. That stupid stone face that I have. But, all right, so we disagree there, but that's good. We're not supposed to agree on things. But the one thing we do agree on is most likely he's going to end up back on the Saints. You don't think that there's another landing spot? I would say if there is, it's going to be the Denver Broncos or the Arizona Cardinals. You heard it here first on Between the Hash Marks. So, but next, we're going to be talking about college basketball. We're going to give you our pick who's going to win March Madness this year right here on BTH.
You're listening to Between the Hash Marks with James Koklak and Sean McCabe, brought to you by an unknown sponsor we don't have yet. Now back to the show.
And welcome back to Between the Hash Marks. We have some college basketball for you. We're really not going to do that much college basketball this entire season, but we have to get our picks into you guys so we're on the record, so you can hear us when we do get our national championship picks correct in November. You can come back and say, wow, these guys are freaking geniuses. But I'm looking at college basketball. Tonight is a huge college basketball night. We have what was it? Kansas against Kentucky. And we have Michigan State against Duke. So 1 versus 2 and 4 versus 7 or whatever Kentucky's at right now. But yeah, those games are going to be amazing. This is when college basketball is really kicking off. And I like Duke this year. Marvin Bagley is a freaking freak. And so that's why Duke will be amazing. But they're not my team that I'm going to pick to win it all this year, because I think this is the year where everybody is sleeping on Kansas, because they just lost Frank Mason, their point guard, who won National Player of the Year. And they just lost Josh Jackson to the NBA. He plays for the Phoenix Suns now. So everybody's like, oh, wow, they just lost these two great players on their team. How are they going to be good this year? But this is the kind of the team that Bill Self is one of the great coaches in college basketball, one of the great coaches in basketball overall. And the Kansas Jayhawks have 13 straight Big Ten titles. That's tied for the record with UCLA's 13 straight Pac-12 titles back with John Wooden. So Bill Self is going to break that record this year. Kansas is going to win the Big 12 conference. I am taking Kansas to win it all this season. Devontae Graham, he's the perfect replacement for Frank Mason, and their transfer Malik Newman from Mississippi State. Those two players are going to completely replace Josh Jackson and Frank Mason. I got the Kansas Jayhawks going all the way. James, what do you got?
All right, I'm going to be completely honest here. College basketball to me is so unentertaining until March Madness. I think it is the most boring thing in the world.
What about the conference championship games?
Half the time you see a game, it's 50-35 or 60-42.
That's only Wisconsin games.
and I don't even watch pro basketball that much anymore because of the way the game has gone.
Oh, you're missing out.
And
this season's so good.
College basketball, March Madness is a whole different ballgame, though. And
we probably won't even talk about it until March Madness.
I have one reason why I'm going with the team I am, which is Duke. That's because Coach K doesn't have that much longer to coach. He's coming to an end of his career at Duke. Within the next 5 years, I'd say he's gone. Okay. He's getting old. He's reached 1,000 wins. There's not much more.
You think he's getting one more?
At least.
At least one more.
At least one more, and who knows? Maybe he wins it all this year and calls it a career, but he's going to get at least one more. He's too good of a coach not to, and he's got the best recruiting class, again, coming in this year. I think that if there is a year Duke is going to pull it out, it's going to be this year. Coach K is too good of a coach, and there's storybook endings in all sports. Peyton Manning was a bottom 5 quarterback in the league the year he won the Super Bowl to retire, and there's a reason why the Broncos won the Super Bowl that year. It's fate. I believe in fate and storybook endings, and that was the storybook ending for Peyton Manning. He had to go out on a winning note. Just like Tom Brady will probably win in one more Super Bowl, and after that Super Bowl, he's probably going to call it a career.
He's coming back for another.
But he may win it this year and then next year too, and then call it. But Tom Brady will most likely call it a career after he wins a Super Bowl. It's just the way sports work. It's just storybook endings, and it's just. I see a storybook ending here for Duke.
All right, well, if you're picking Duke, you might as well know who Marvin Bagley is, because he's the 6'11" freak who just is going to dominate the NBA when he officially gets there.
And kind of like a Greek freak.
Yeah, kind of like a Greek freak a little bit. I mean, not.
Well, hopefully the Bulls get the worst record this year, which right now they're on pace for it.
They are on pace
and
for it.
I'll take that dude right there.
I mean, if they just keep having players punch other players on their team, they'll settle.
Well, both those players are back, and they won't even talk to each other. So let's keep that up, Chicago, because I want the number 1 pick in the league this year. We need to recap and circle around from when we had Derrick Rose and restart that process, and it starts with a number 1 pick.
All right, quickly. It is currently 6:30 p.m. The college football playoff ranking show comes out in about 30 minutes.
30 minutes. I think the rankings come out in an hour, 7:30.
Okay. What is your 4
Easy.
right now?
Easy.
Right now. Tell me what it is.
Alabama 1 without question. Okay. Miami 2 without question. They are undefeated. They have 2 amazing wins back-to-back weeks. Unbelievable. Miami looks like the real deal. Oklahoma is going to be my number 3 team here.
Okay.
Clemson is going to be number 4.
Okay. All right.
Wisconsin's my 5th. I want to give them credit. But even though Clemson has that 1 loss, it came against Syracuse. Yes, I know, a terrible team, but without Kelly Bryant in every other game, except for this Florida State game, they have looked pretty good.
Yeah.
They're the defending national champions. I can't leave them out.
Okay, yeah, no, I have Bama number 1 just like you, but I think Oklahoma's going to move to number 2 because they had a super impressive win against TCU. TCU just they weren't giving up points in their last few games, and then Oklahoma just
comes
routs them.
Baker Mayfield is the real deal. You hear that, New York Jets? Baker Mayfield.
So I have Oklahoma number 2, and then I have Miami number 3. You gotta put Miami in there. Miami just destroyed Notre Dame. They manhandled Virginia Tech the week before that. So you gotta put Miami at number 3. But the team that absolutely must be number 4 is the Wisconsin Badgers. They are undefeated. They got a somewhat quality win. They beat a ranked opponent, and they destroyed them. And this is a team that Iowa Hawkeyes, they just beat Ohio State, and they almost beat Penn State. So Iowa Hawkeyes are no joke. If they beat Penn State, they would have been ranked probably in the top 15, probably top 10, if not even higher, going into that game. And Wisconsin just completely routed them. I do have Clemson 5 and Auburn as a 6th team.
I'll tell you what, very, very, very quickly, I am super looking forward to this Alabama-Auburn game in a couple of weeks.
Oh, yeah, and then Miami-Clemson, it's going to happen. Like, they both clinched.
I'm so looking forward to both these games. And one last thing I do want to add, and you're hearing it here first, if Alabama loses to Auburn, yes, they're not going to play for the SEC championship game, but Alabama will still make the Final Four over an undefeated Wisconsin team because of the schedule that Alabama did play, now with 2 quality wins. And
interesting.
If they lose to Auburn, it will not be a blowout. It'll be a close game. And I think the committee is going to go with a team who's been back-to-back national championships game. 2 back-to-back national championship games, going 1-1, both insanely close games.
Very, very interesting. All right. You heard it here. You heard our playoff rankings right now. You heard our predictions for the college football or college basketball season. Sorry, our predictions on where Drew Brees is going to end up going. Everything else with Dak Prescott, Zeke Elliott, the Dallas Cowboys. Please tune in next week. We have your favorite stuff: the picks against the spread, the DraftKings, the fantasy waiver wire pickups, and we'll have a special opening rant for you. You're listening to BTH.